Jonathan Burkhardt from the Illustration as Visual Essay program, that's them out there, represents this year's master's degree candidates. Since graduating from the University of Wisconsin in 2000, he has had 26 different jobs over the course of 12 years and only got fired once. Most were on political campaigns, but he also worked as a teacher of history, ESL, and of the developmentally disabled, as an EMT, a union organizer, a web designer, and a telephone operator for the deaf. In 2007, Jonathan lived in Vermont with his grandfather, a prominent educator and first president of Bennington College, working with him on his memoirs. They got through a first draft shortly before his grandfather died at the ripe age of 95. That year of Jonathan's life led him away from his many other interests and deeply into writing and drawing, passions he'd had for his entire life but never fully indulged. And it became the topic of his MFA thesis. Celebrating with Jonathan here today? Yes, they made it. Okay. Are his mother and father, Janie and Ross, his Aunt Jane, and sister, Dr. Jillian Burkhardt. Will they please stand so we can honor them for their support? Now I present to you the graduate speaker, Jonathan Burkhardt.
Thank you, President David Rhodes, Executive Vice President Anthony Rhodes, members of the board, department chairs, distinguished guest Grail Marcus, parents, friends, graduating peers in the class of 2013. It is my honor and pleasure to thank you for being here today. My grandfather, a philosopher by training, who was prone to the use of maxim and aphorism, particularly in the twilight of his life, often used to say that talent and character are independent variables. This is a man who broke bread with the writer Ralph Ellison, the choreographer Martha Graham, and the great Welsh poet Dylan Thomas. He loved the company of artists, famous and not, and he revered their work. In fact, he was a student of a philosopher named John Dewey, who viewed creative activity as the pinnacle of human experience. And as often as he admired their work, he was also saddened to see the great writers and poets and painters in his life develop their craft and their talent to the great detriment of themselves and the people around them. As I'm sure many of the candidates in this room know, it is very easy to get lost in the obsessions and directions our talents and curiosities take us in. To let art, this gift to ourselves, become selfish, destructive, or isolating. The stories my grandfather would tell at his dinner table about these artists, of the potential of creative ability to wreak havoc on oneself and the people around them, is one of the reasons why, in spite of a lifelong passion for storytelling and drawing, I didn't fully dedicate myself to art until my early 30s. Interestingly, I spent my 20s working on political campaigns, an industry that is hardly immune to the dangers of ego and selfishness. It took 10 years working on political campaigns and the death of my grandfather to realize that when he said talent and character are independent variables, he did not mean that talent and creativity leads to bad character. He just meant they have nothing to do with each other. Instead, the grand mistake was to confuse one's talent with one's character. Even with all of the cautionary tales I heard, I know I've been guilty of that. Entertaining the idea that because I'm doing this art thing, this thing that I love and cherish so much, I'm also doing good things. But the good and the art operate on separate tracks. And even when they collide, the interaction does not have to be a negative one. Picasso still would have created monuments of Western art if he had viewed all of the women in his life as goddesses rather than doormats. Wagner would have composed great operas if he had treated the Jewish community as equals. So I guess the question now becomes, how do we as creative individuals prevent ourselves from confusing our talent with our character? I suspect there's probably a lot of ways to answer this question. I recently heard a story of an artist who said that when you are running into a burning building and have the choice between saving your art and a cat, a good artist will always save the cat. Another way of saying that the most important part of being an artist is the being, not the art. This is a lesson I learned from a painter friend of mine named Viola Moriarty, who is one of the greatest artists I know, not simply because her art was great, but because she was great at being an artist. Art was never selfish. It was a tool that referred to her love of the world. The model was always more important than the paint, the life more important than the still. An attitude which infused her paintings with the love she had for her children, her husband, her family, and the world around her. Talent nurtured character and the character of the people around her, and the character of the people around her deeply nurtured her art. So at this time, I'd like to recognize all the people who have not only helped us with our craft, but who have helped us with the task of being good artists. The parents, friends, family, the classmates who support us. It is nurturing our connections with you that prevent our talent from harming our character, and it is these connections which deserve our applause. I'd like to end with a reminder from an artist who told me that in spite of the considerable expense that this art education I've just engaged in is actually a gift to myself. That we in this room are amongst the lucky few who get up in the morning and do something that we love. And though it's not always easy, fun, or relaxing, as many would have you believe, creative lives have the potential to be exhilarating in a way that few other activities do. We just have to make sure that fact doesn't go to our heads. And the way we do that as we go out into the world is by making sure that we don't confuse our talent with our character. We use creativity as a way to nurture ourselves and the people around us. It will never harm our art, and it will only improve our lives. Thank you. Godspeed. Good luck.
Thank you, Jonathan. That was quite wonderful.